Welcome back. Let's check in on the Moreland Commission mess for Governor Cuomo. The anti-corruption panel he created, then apparently steered away from himself and from his allies, then disbanded as part of a budget deadline deal. First up, the Wall Street Journal reports Larry Schwartz, Governor Cuomo's top deputy, will meet with federal prosecutors this month. The Times reported that Schwartz demanded and got the commission to pull back a subpoena against an ad buying firm used by Cuomo and state Democrats. Meanwhile, Politico's Maggie Haberman writing that the Moreland mess is hurting Cuomo because of his M.O., his heavy-handed way of doing business. Think of it similarly to Chris Christie in New Jersey, playing the bully role hard enough, and once the bully takes a hit, everyone in the political realm jumps to pile on. Finally, the Post's designated Cuomo basher, Fred Dicker, writes the governor's staff is, quote, crazed with anger and increasingly abusive to those around him and in fear of what are likely to be sagging poll numbers. Morass is set to issue Cuomo's first set of approval numbers since the Moreland story broke on July 23rd. Those numbers are supposed to come out this week. Jeannie, you're the poll expert at the table. I'll get to you in 1 second, Jessica.
She's jumping in the back.
I know she is. How big a hit do you think this is for Andrew Cuomo if nothing else comes out beyond what we already know?
I think he is. I think his numbers are going to be soft. I mean, I don't know. I couldn't even guess how soft, but I think we're going to see soft and sagging numbers on his part. And the question is it going to be enough to get him out and talking? I mean, quite frankly, that's what I would like to see the governor do, is to get out and speak to reporters and answer questions, take responsibility for his role, if any, and I'm not saying he has any, but if there's any role, hold people in his administration accountable, and then tell us how he's going to move forward. So, you know, if the numbers are soft enough, it gets him to do that. I think that would be to the benefit of everybody. One thing working for the governor is the timing. Normal people have no idea what is going on. They're on vacation, unlike you, Andrew.
Thank you.
They're on vacation with their families. They're enjoying themselves in the sun. Unlike Michael and Jessica, they're not paying attention to this. So that's in the governor's favor.
And you mentioned Cuomo talking to the media. He clammed up late last week and basically said, as a result of Preet Bharara and his concerns over the communication
he held that
from the
big midnight press conference in Buffalo.
Okay, here comes the biggest softball question of the day. Jessica, what's your reaction to what's going on with the Moreland Commission and Governor Cuomo?
Big trouble. He's in big trouble. No, I agree with what Janine said. I think she makes a very good point that I think people are just now starting to focus on this. You know, it is sort of a complex issue. Once people understand what it is, I think they will have a very big issue with it and hold him accountable for that. But it's going to take a little while to sink in. You know, we all read the newspapers every day. Not everyone does, unfortunately.
See, they're not normal. I said that.
People are enjoying the summer. But I do think as people start focusing on the race, I think probably, you know, his unfavorables will go up and, you know, people will be concerned about the issues. But as people start to focus in the fall is when it's really going to matter. And of course, you know, several members of the administration are going to start having to testify before the grand jury, so we'll see what comes out of that. But it is a very serious issue, and frankly, you know, in some of my discussions with reporters, this is a lot bigger than Rob Astorino or the campaign. I think he has serious questions he needs to answer.
Jury? You say grand jury.
They've impaneled a grand jury that they have to testify in front of.
No, I thought the U.S. attorney was considering all of this, but I didn't know that he's already
we know that Schwartz is meeting with prosecutors. I don't think it's under oath, and I don't think it's to a grand jury.
There have been reports that the assistant to the executive director of the commission is testifying before the grand jury. That's what's been reported in the paper.
We're not going to know.
So, but he, you know, he has to conduct his investigation, but it's a very serious issue, and there are a lot of unanswered questions, and I think his response was so flippant and arrogant that, you know, just shows how he's treating this whole thing and how he treats the public, and that's going to cause a lot of concern.
As we said on the break, nothing is ever just one thing. There's the role of the Attorney General, and whether he came out and said, well, I don't have a lawyer. I guess I'll respond to questions on my own about this. So they're going to be asking hard questions of the Attorney General, and he has a race that should be taken very seriously. Kathleen Rice on the Moreland Commission, who's running for Congress in a part of Nassau County that is rich with both Democratic and Republican votes, is going to have a role in this, and they say emails between her and Larry Schwartz should be revealing, so that's going to impact her race. And there's actually is a grand jury being impaneled investigating the Working Families Party and illegal coordination with unions and candidates there. That's a city campaign, but the Attorney General and the governor having made their deals with the Working Families Party, it all implicates and blows back on
Nothing
everybody.
is ever one thing. I want to get to the flip side in the gubernatorial race. And if the polling shows the Moreland mess hurting Governor Cuomo, and helping Republican Rob Astorino, and it may well be the first issue of the election to move the needles. I want to check out some poll numbers to help make that point. Overall, the poll average in the race has Cuomo up 32 points. Now, Astorino's been asking if New York is winning or losing, and from the latest Siena poll, voters don't seem to think the state is losing. 49% say the state's on the right path, 40% saying it's going on the wrong direction. Even worse for Astorino, 77% of voters say the state is either better off or about the same as it was 4 years ago. Only 22% think it's worse off. Even more voters say they are better off or about the same as they were 4 years ago. Those same voters give Cuomo credit for how New York is doing. 59% say the governor has made New York better. 37% disagree. And on a pair of specific issues Astorino's been leaning on, more people oppose fracking in the state than support it. Astorino has made this a key to his campaign. By the way, only 2% of voters say fracking is their biggest issue. And finally, there's Common Core school standards, or as Astorino calls it, Cuomo's Common Core. More voters actually agree with Astorino on this one. 49% want Common Core stopped, but only 1% of all voters say this is the biggest issue in the race. So, Jessica, let me come back to you, obviously, in all this. Is Rob Astorino having trouble finding synergy with his issues and where the pulse of New York voters are?
Absolutely not. I mean, there's two pieces to this. The first is when you loop in better or about the same, people don't feel like things are getting better. Half the state thinks we're going on the wrong track. And simultaneously,
40%.
He's spending, well, in that one poll, but other polls have showed a much higher numbers. So 40%, every poll you look at and every statistic you look at, New York is in dead last compared to every other state in America. And he's spending over $200 million on Startup New York ads using taxpayer money, saying everything's great, the state's going in the right direction, which is just not true. Upstate, if it were a state unto itself, it would be dead last in economic recovery. I mean, there's no growth up there. Even Long Island and the Hudson Valley have seen very minimal growth. So outside of the island of Manhattan, the state is hurting, and people do feel that way. Everywhere you go, that's what they're talking about. You know, everyone knows someone that has left New York for another state.
Michael, has Jessica taken the correct temperature of New York State?
I would say I agree with some of it, and I'll stress the areas I agree with, which is New York is a huge state, and New York City, specifically Manhattan and affluent parts of Brooklyn and Queens, are just one small part of it. They're heavy with voters, but they're heavy with Democratic primary voters. When it comes to general elections, for example, Nassau and Suffolk County, Long Island, 18% of the statewide general election vote. If you combine Binghamton, Elmira, Utica, Rochester, Syracuse, parts of the southern tier in the Hudson Valley, Rockland, Orange, Putnam, Dutchess, it could offset a heavy turnout in New York City if the issues resonate. And the issues Jessica mentioned, most of them are the ones that resonate with voters when the summer's over, when kids are back in school, and when normal people are paying attention.
My prediction, when we see the first polls to come out on this, I think I would agree with the professor. His support will probably, meaning Mr. Cuomo, be a little soft, just a little bit. There's good news and bad news in this for Mr. Astorino. The good news is that this is happening. And so it's new life in his campaign where he's trailing badly and trailing in terms of the fundraising department. But the bad news, as the professor pointed out, it's the middle of the summer. No one except for the 5 people at this table are paying attention to that. But what Mr. Cuomo has to be careful with is that his personality. We all know his personality at this table. And the response that he gave in public to this man-on-man battle with the U.S. attorney that he cannot win because the U.S. attorney has more power in terms of he can impanel a full grand jury and make Mr. Cuomo's life a living hell in this election year. He's got to, that's why it's smart for his people to say, Governor, count to 10
you are
before
not
you respond.
allowed to lie to federal
That's an
investigators.
excellent point.
You could lie to police officers in the
That's an
city. You can
excellent
lie to
point.
state investigators.
That's an excellent point.
As an attorney, I would never recommend that, and I'm not saying that now. But it's actually it is a crime to lie to the FBI and to the U.S. attorney.
Point.
Jeannie, I expect that Cuomo's approval numbers will take a hit, but does that necessarily raise Rob Astorino's numbers, given that the numbers that I just gave in terms of issues and and where voters seem to think that Cuomo has done well for the state.
It doesn't necessarily raise his recognition, you know, it doesn't necessarily raise his approval, but what it does do, as Dominic mentioned, is give him a shot to get out there. You know, this is what you need to do as a challenger. You need to give people a reason to turn from the incumbent and to say, look at me, this is what I'm offering. And so this is an opportunity for Rob Astorino, and we all know him. He is a very good guy in terms of being on television, talking to people, shaking hands. As Dominic mentioned, that's not the governor's necessarily forte. So the more people get to know Rob Astorino, the more they may like him. Now, the issues in some cases are going to work against him, and in some cases they're going to work for him. But this does give him an opportunity. And we should say Rob Astorino also has Jessica on his side.
Right.
So, I mean...
and toward that end, just to wrap up the segment, Jessica, I'll give you 20 seconds to explain again why my theory is full of it.
About
Astorino's
winning
numbers
or
not
losing?
necessarily getting boosted.
No, and I agree with Jeannie on that. I don't think they necessarily will, but we are still on track. We're raising a lot more money now. People are starting to get involved in the campaign where they thought that he was invincible before. They see a crack and they're starting to come in. You know, he threatens everyone. We all know that. He threatens donors, anyone wanting to step forward and help. So now there's a more willingness to get the press. So there's a more willingness now to come out, and that's been very good for the campaign. This is just starting. It's not the end of the story. It's just the beginning of the story, and people are going to start paying attention.
If I ever run for office, I want the team on my right running my campaign.
And what about us?
What? We're just nothing?
You can cover it.
I can't be the angry press secretary that curses out the media every day. Mayor Whitman is not taking any questions.
I'd rather have you as the angry journalist.
Okay.
Up next, what's wrong in Washington and how to fix it, as if we know. Congress takes a pass on key legislation before skipping town as they work toward a record low in productivity. And happy birthday, Mr. President. You're present? What President Obama is doing wrong, and has he essentially checked out of the Oval Office? We're wagging our fingers next.